Hey class, today we're going to talk about slope. And slope is the ratio of vertical change to horizontal change. Now, you guys are probably more familiar with hearing of slope as rise over run. Okay? But that just means the same thing. Rise over run is the same thing as the ratio of vertical change to horizontal change. Your rise is how much your line changes vertically, and your run is how much it changes horizontally. Okay? Now, there's a few different things we need to know about slope before we can actually get into using it. First off, positive slope means that slope rises from left to right. A negative slope means that your slope will fall from left to right. A zero slope means that your slope is horizontal. And an undefined slope means that your slope is vertical. Okay? Here's examples of all of those things right over here. A positive slope rises from left to right. As you can see, as we go from left to right, that line is going up. A negative slope falls from left to right. Going from left to right, that line is going down. A zero slope is horizontal. As we can see, that is straight across horizontal. And an undefined slope is vertical, straight up and down. Okay? Now, I'm sure you've all seen positive and negative slope before. You might be a little less familiar with zero slope and undefined slope. So a good way to help you remember what those look like is that the word zero starts with a Z. The sides of a Z are horizontal, just like the line that zero slope makes. The word undefined starts with a U. The sides of a U are vertical. They go up and down, just like the line that a vertical slope makes. Okay? So that's an easy way to remember those two things. Alright, next up we want to talk about what does it mean for two lines to be parallel and what does it mean for two lines to be perpendicular. Well, parallel lines mean that they have the same slope. Same slope, parallel lines, that means they are never ever going to cross. They'll look something like this. Both going the same direction at the same angle, and they will never ever cross, no matter how far you extend those lines out. Perpendicular lines are the opposite of that. Perpendicular lines have a negative reciprocal slope. And they always cross at a 90-degree angle. Okay? So these are both perpendicular lines. We can see that little red box there means that they are crossing at a 90-degree angle. So negative reciprocal slope, cross at a 90-degree angle. That's your perpendicular line. Your parallel lines have the same slope and they never cross. Alright, what happens if you lose your slope? Well, I'm going to show you how to find it. So if you're given two coordinates and you've lost your slope and you need to find it, this is what you're going to do. You're going to use the slope formula to find your slope. The slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And here's how that works. The first thing we're going to do, to plug it into this, we need to label our coordinates. So we know all coordinates are x and y. So to get x1 and y1, we're just going to go from left to right. The first one we see will be x1 and y1. The next one we see will be x2 and y2. Now we're going to go ahead and plug these in. So we start with y2 minus y1. We can see that y2 is right here, that's 7. And y1 is right here, that's negative 3. So we have to do minus y1. So that's minus negative 3. And we're going to put that over x2 minus x1. x2 is negative 1. And x1 is 4, so negative 1 minus 4. Okay, moving down, we need to simplify this. 7 minus negative 3, we have to keep change. That's going to give me 10. Negative 1 minus 4, again we're going to keep change. Negative 1 plus negative 4 gives me negative 5. We have to keep simplifying. 10 over negative 5 is going to give me negative 2, and that is my slope. Well, what happens if we're not given two coordinates? What if we're only given a graph like this? Well, like we said earlier, slope is also rise over run, the vertical change over the horizontal change. So we can look at the points given to us on this graph and count from one to the other to find our rise over our run, which will give us our slope. Okay? The key to this is always go from left to right. Just like reading a book. Always go from left to right. The furthest point to the left is this one right here. That point is -5, and that's where we're going to start. Okay? We want to count our rise and our run going from this point to the next point we see, which is this one up here. So how far would I have to go up or down to get from this point to this point? Well, I'm going to have to go up. Let's count how many spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 is how many I'd have to go up, so I put 5 as my rise. My run is how many spaces do I have to go over to get from this point to this point. So I have to go over 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to give me 5 over 4, and that's my slope. So again, we count how far we go up and how far we go over to get our slope, our rise over our run. What if a question is asking which line is steeper, and it gives you coordinates on 2 different lines? The only way to tell which line is actually going to be steeper is to find the slope. So here's the steps. The first thing we'll do is find the slope with the slope formula. Of course, that's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Then we're going to take the absolute value of each one and choose the biggest. So let's go through this. Alright, starting out, I'm going to do the one on the left first. That gives me y2 minus y1 is going to give me -1 minus 3. Let me label these for you so you can see what I did. So y2 minus y1 gave me -1 minus 3, which gave me -4. x2 minus x1 was -2 minus 4, which gives me -6. I have to simplify that, and that gives me a positive 2/3. Moving over to my second line, I have -6 and 5 and -1 and 0. That's going to be x1, y1 and x2, y2. Plugging these in, I get 0 minus 5, which gives me -5, and -1 minus -6, -1 minus -6. I have to keep change on this one. -1 plus 6 is going to give me 5. -5 over 5 is going to give me a -1. Step 2 says take the absolute value. The reason we take the absolute value is that whether a line is going up from left to right or down from left to right, it doesn't matter. Because either way, it could be steep or not steep. Let me turn these lights back on. So I think we could all agree that even though this one's going up from left to right, and this one is going down from left to right, this one is a steeper line. So it doesn't matter if the slope is positive or negative to find the steepness. So we take the absolute value. The absolute value of 2/3 is 2/3. Remember, that's the distance away from 0. The absolute value of -1 is a positive 1. Well, which one's bigger? 2/3 is a fraction. That's got to be smaller than 1. 1 is a whole number, so that's got to be my bigger one. So the steepest slope is this one, is number 1. Alright, the last thing we're going to learn about is how to tell if lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither without actually being able to see the graph of the line. Well, this is really cool because we can find this out and we don't have to go and graph a whole bunch of lines. We don't have to use graph paper. We can just calculate the slope, compare them, and we'll be able to tell if the lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So again, there's a couple steps here. The first step is find the slope using the slope formula. You're going to know the slope formula really well. Step 2 is compare the two slopes. So our first scenario is given to us right here on the left. It says line 1 has these coordinates and line 2 has these coordinates. So the first thing we're going to do is use our slope formula and find the slope of line 1. I went ahead and plugged these in. 3 minus 1 gave me 2. Negative 5 minus negative 2 gave me negative 3. For the bottom line, line 2, 5 minus 3 gave me 2, and 3 minus 0 gave me 3. Here's our reminder up here. If they're parallel, they will have the same slope. If they're perpendicular, their slopes will be the negative reciprocal of each other. Looking at these lines, this is negative 2/3 and this is positive 2/3. Although they are negative, they are not reciprocals. Remember, reciprocal means you flip the fraction. So they are negative, but they're not reciprocals. They're clearly not the same. So after we compare these, we can see that these are neither. They are neither parallel nor perpendicular. Moving on to our second scenario, line 1 is 0, 6 and negative 5, 0. Line 2 is negative 4, 4 and 2, negative 1. We're going to go ahead and find the slope of each line and then compare those slopes to see if they are parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So calculating this out, I did 0 minus 6, which gave me negative 6. And then I did negative 5 minus 0, which gave me negative 5. A negative over a negative gives me a positive, so that's 6/5. My next one is negative 1 minus 4, which gave me negative 5. And 2 minus negative 4, which gave me a positive 6. If I keep change. So we can see that this one is 6 over 5. This one is negative 5 over 6. They are the negatives of each other. This one's positive, this one's negative, so they have opposite signs. They are reciprocals of each other. This is 6/5, this is 5/6. They're flipped. So since we see that they're negative reciprocals, we know that these lines are perpendicular. And that's it. Now you know how to find parallel perpendicular lines. You can tell me which line is steeper, and you can find slope.